Have you ever paused to consider what truly happens if your digital identity, every login, every online footprint falls into the wrong hands? In our increasingly connected lives, this isn't really a hypothetical question anymore, is it? It's a very real and, frankly, growing threat. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a dark, yet surprisingly accessible corner of the internet that is increasingly impacting all of us. From individuals just checking their email to major government agencies, we're talking about info stealers.
Yeah, it's a type of threat that operates with, well, remarkable scale and often surprising stealth. These aren't just isolated, one-off attacks from a single hacker anymore. What we're witnessing is a sophisticated yet highly accessible business model that has fundamentally changed the landscape of cybercrime. The barriers to entry have never been lower for these malicious operations, and that accessibility, that's a huge part of the problem.
That's a crucial point. And actually, before we unpack this complex topic, we want to thank our sponsor, Stonefly. They're a leader in enterprise storage, backup, and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. Really top-notch stuff. If you're looking for secure, ransomware-proof storage that offers truly robust protection, Stonefly sells air-gapped and immutable storage. It's designed to safeguard your data against even the most persistent threats. You can contact sales at stonefly.com to schedule a demo. They truly understand the importance of securing your digital assets in a world where, well, evolving threats like info-stealers are a constant concern. So our mission today is to pull back the curtain on these info-stealers. We'll explore what they are, how they work, who's actually behind them, and perhaps most surprisingly, the unique economics and widespread impact of this rapidly expanding cybercrime. It's a fascinating, if maybe a bit unsettling, look behind the scenes of a major digital danger that really touches all of us.
Exactly. And our goal is to help you understand not just the what, but the why it matters to you. These seemingly small-scale operations often serve as the initial domino in much larger, far more devastating cyber attacks. Think of them as the critical first step, the foot in the door. Knowing how infostealers function and proliferate offers critical context for any digital user. Whether you're an individual managing your personal accounts or part of an organization trying to protect sensitive data, they're frequently the very first link in a chain of events that can lead to significant compromise.
Okay, so let's start with the basics then. What exactly is an info-stealer?
Right. So at its core, an infostealer is a specific type of malicious software, what we commonly call malware. Its primary purpose is to be the very first stage of credential theft. Think of it like a digital burglar, specifically crafted.
Okay, like a specialist thief.
Precisely. A specialist thief designed to snatch your personal information. Things like your usernames, your passwords, and even those little bits of data called cookies that your browser stores to, keep you logged into websites without having to sign in every single time.
Right, those things that make browsing easier but can be risky.
Exactly. The whole point for the attacker is to gain unauthorized access to your online accounts, often without you even realizing it's happening. It's designed to be stealthy.
Okay. And you mentioned it's often the first stage. How does that fit into the bigger picture of, say, credential theft?
Good question. In the world of cybercrime, credential theft typically unfolds in a fairly well-defined four-stage process. Info-stealers are specifically engineered for that crucial initial phase, what we call the acquisition phase. They're designed to get that first foothold into your digital life.
Got it. The acquisition phase.
Yep. And conceptually, an info-stealer usually has two main parts. First, there's the bot framework. This is the actual program that runs on a victim's computer, silently collecting and stealing information. Second, there's the command and control, or C2 server.
C2 server. That
Yep.
sounds ominous.
It is, in a way. You can think of this as the attacker's central hub or maybe a management panel. It's where all the stolen data gets sent back to, and it's also where the attacker controls the malware from, potentially giving it new instructions.
This next piece of information really shines a light on how these operations are structured. I understand info stealers are primarily distributed under what's known as the malware-as-a-service, or MaaS model.
It's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And this MaaS model is a huge factor in their proliferation.
So explain that a bit. Malware-as-a-service, it sounds like software subscriptions, but for crime.
That's a perfect analogy, actually. Imagine it exactly like a subscription service for cybercriminals. This model dramatically lowers both the technical and the financial barriers to entry. It makes it alarmingly accessible. You don't need to be a coding genius or have a massive budget to get involved in this type of crime anymore.
Wow. Okay, so who are the players in this MaaS ecosystem then?
Generally, under this MaaS model, three distinct groups typically emerge. Each plays a crucial role, almost like a dark supply chain. First, you have the developers. These are the most technically skilled individuals. They're the ones who write the complex Infostealer code itself. They build the malicious software from the ground up.
Architects of the malware.
Exactly. Second are the malware service providers. They typically purchase licenses from these developers and then, in turn, offer the malware as a service to other cybercriminals. They're essentially the resellers or distributors.
Okay, so they package it up and sell it on.
Pretty much. And finally, there are the operators. These are the individuals who actually use the service to perform the credential theft. Their skill level can vary wildly. Sometimes they might be developers or service providers themselves, but often they're less sophisticated users simply looking for an easy way to commit cybercrime.
And that's the real game changer here, isn't it? This accessibility.
It fundamentally changes the game, yes.
It means cybercrime is no longer exclusive to, like, elite hackers in darkened rooms.
Yeah.
It's now within reach for practically anyone willing to pay a small fee, regardless of their technical skill.
That's the reality.
So if it's so easy to get, how do these malicious programs actually make their way onto your computer, onto the victim's machine?
The delivery mechanism.
Yeah.
You've hit on the critical next step. These malicious programs often breach victim machines through tactics you're probably already familiar with, but maybe with a dangerous twist. We see a heavy reliance on what we call social engineering techniques.
Which is basically tricking people, right?
Exactly. It's all about psychological manipulation, tricking people into doing something they shouldn't, like clicking a bad link or opening a malicious attachment.
So what does that look like in practice? What are the common methods?
Well, phishing campaigns are a classic, and they're still incredibly effective. This includes highly targeted spear phishing.
Where they make it look really personal.
Precisely. Emails crafted to look very convincing, aimed at specific individuals or organizations. These malicious programs are frequently embedded in email attachments, perhaps disguised as an invoice, a shipping notification, an important document. Or they might be hidden behind malicious links that lead to compromised websites.
So you click the link thinking it's legit.
Right. And without realizing it, you might trigger what's called a drive-by download. This means simply visiting a compromised website can silently install malware without you even clicking anything specific on the page or realizing it's happening. It instantly puts the Infostealer onto your system.
Wow, okay. So visiting a bad site is enough. What else?
Beyond phishing, another prevalent method is bundling. This is really common. Infostealers are often packaged with seemingly legitimate or desirable software. Imagine you're trying to download a free browser extension, or maybe a game cheating package. Lots of people look for those, or even pirated software, like a cracked version of an expensive application or a movie.
Things people search for all the time online.
Exactly. What you don't see is that the Infostealer is hidden within that download, ready to execute as soon as you install or run the main program you thought you were getting. It's a cunning way to sneak past initial defenses because, well, you think you're getting something you actually want.
And what happens immediately after a system gets infected? Let's say someone clicks a link or runs the bundled software. What's the immediate aftermath?
Okay, so once the stealer is downloaded and run by a victim, and often this happens without any obvious sign, it silently starts communicating with the attacker's command and control servers, that C2 hub we talked about.
Right, phoning home.
Exactly. This communication is what enables the information theft. It's working in the background, extracting data without any obvious signs on your computer like slowdowns or pop-ups usually. And here's another really concerning point. Some Infostealers are designed to allow the attacker to remotely execute additional malware.
Oh, so it's not just about stealing what's already there.
Not always.
Yeah.
This means that initial credential theft could just be the first step in a much larger, more destructive attack. Perhaps they use that initial access to deploy ransomware that locks up all your files and demands payment. The Infostealer is the key that unlocks the door for potentially much worse things.
Okay, let's unpack this further then. What kind of sensitive information are these programs actually designed to pull from your system? It sounds like it goes way beyond just your basic login details.
It absolutely does. And Infostealer's primary function is, to extract sensitive data about the victim and send it back to the attacker's C2 servers. But the precise type of data stolen can vary a lot. It depends on the operator's specific settings and the particular Infostealer variant being used. They can often configure what they want to target. However, most Infostealers are built to harvest a wide range of information. things about your computer's operating system, its settings, various user profiles stored on it.
So system information, configurations.
Right. And more advanced infostealers can even introduce secondary malware, like those remote access Trojans or RATs.
RATs, that sounds nasty.
It is. They give the attacker full remote control over your machine. They can see your screen, log your keystrokes, turn on your webcam, everything. And yes, as we mentioned, even ransomware, they're not just taking, they're often setting the stage for future, potentially much more damaging compromises.
Can you give us some examples, maybe trace the evolution a bit?
Sure. To give you some historical context, we can look back to, say, 2009 at the Zeus Infostealer. It was one of the earliest really prominent examples of its kind. Researchers back then found that Zeus would automatically extract all data stored in a computer's protected storage service, which at the time was typically used by Internet Explorer to store passwords.
The old Internet Explorer vault.
Exactly. It also captured passwords sent via common Internet protocols like POP3 for email and FTP for file transfers, which were less encrypted back then. The key insight from Zeus, though, was its flexibility. Attackers could configure it to perform specific web injections.
Web injections, what's that?
It means essentially altering what you saw on legitimate websites. It could inject fake login fields onto your bank's website, for example, to trick you into revealing sensitive information. Or it could be configured just to monitor certain website URLs for specific data being entered. It showed how adaptable these tools could be right from the start.
Okay, so that was Zeus back in 2009. How have things changed? What do modern stealers look like?
Right, fast forward to, say, 2020, and we see something like the Azure Stealer. This one showcased significantly more modern capabilities. Researchers were able to reverse engineer its workings and discovered a builder feature within Azure.
A builder?
Yeah, basically a tool that allowed the operators, the criminals using it, to precisely define what kind of data they wanted to steal. This meant an attacker could custom tailor their malicious payload for maximum impact on a specific target or specific types of data. Much more granular control.
So what kind of data could Azure be configured to steal specifically?
The analysis revealed a whole suite of specific modules. For example, it could extract a user's entire browser history, not just passwords, but everywhere you've been online. It also had a customizable pattern matching system using something called regular expressions to retrieve arbitrary files from a user's computer. If they knew a certain file type or name might contain valuable info, they could tell it to grab that.
Wow, so it could just snatch files.
Potentially, yes, if configured that way. There was also a dedicated module to extract passwords stored in web browsers, Chrome, Firefox, etc. Another module grabbed scope chat history. And critically, there was a module specifically designed to find and extract cryptocurrency wallet files.
Going straight for the money.
Exactly. This highlights a crucial shift, or maybe an expansion. These tools are no longer just looking for basic logins to email or social media. They're diversifying their targets, aiming for direct financial gain by siphoning cryptocurrency or getting deeper access to your personal digital assets.
Okay, so based on Azure and similar modern stealers, what are the main types of data they're frequently stealing and that end up being sold?
Researchers often categorize the most valuable stolen data into three main types that are frequently traded on these underground markets. First, fingerprints. These aren't your actual fingerprints, obviously. They're unique identifiers constructed by probing various features available from your browser, things like the fonts you have installed, your screen resolution, browser plugins, operating system.
Like a digital fingerprint of your browser setup?
Precisely. It allows cybercriminals to track users across the web, sometimes even more effectively than traditional cookies, and can help them bypass some anti-fraud systems. Second, cookies. We mentioned these earlier. They're incredibly valuable because they allow buyers to hijack a victim's browser session.
How does that work?
Well, by simply importing these stolen cookies into their own browser, criminals can often bypass login screens entirely. If you were logged into your bank or email, they might be able to just open the site and be logged in as you without needing your password.
That's terrifying. Okay, what's the third type?
The third category is resources. This generally refers to browser-related files found directly on a user's operating system. The most common example is the actual files where browsers like Chrome or Firefox store your saved passwords in an encrypted format. Stealing these files allows attackers to try and crack the encryption offline to get the raw passwords. So the key takeaway here is that it's not just about getting one password anymore. It's about gaining persistent, comprehensive access to your entire online presence, your digital life, really.
Okay, to truly understand the modern landscape, sometimes we need to zoom in on a specific case. I know we've got some fascinating insights into Nova Sentinel, This one apparently offers a window into a more localized, even French-speaking cybercrime ecosystem. What did the technical analysis of, I think it was version 12.5, reveal?
That's right. The analysis of Nova Sentinel version 12.5 showed some key operational changes and, yeah, some pretty interesting characteristics. One of the most significant was a strategic shift in the domain name they use for their operations. The group transitioned from hawkish.fr to ieatpoop.info.
Subtle. Why the change?
Well, the assumption is this move reflects an attempt at increased stealth, or maybe just to evade block lists associated with the old domain. Though, interestingly, the underlying URL structure for sending the stolen data back remained exactly the same. Just the front-facing domain changed.
Okay. What else was new in this version?
This new version also introduced more sophisticated obfuscation techniques.
Obfuscation, making the code harder to read.
Exactly. The developers put in place complex methods to hide or scramble the original plain text code. It makes it much harder for security analysts like us to reverse engineer it and understand exactly what the malware is designed to do. It's like trying to read a book where every word is encrypted or jumbled up. It takes more effort to decode.
Any quirks in how it was set up or configured?
Yeah, there was one field that stood out in the configuration called client email. The malware apparently uses this field to potentially modify the email address associated with two-factor authentication, 2FA, on various services found on the victim's machine. Now, the function to actually change the email wasn't enabled in the sample they analyzed, and the email address listed was just a default one. But hypothetically, this method could inadvertently expose information specific to a Nova Sentinel client, the person using the stealer, back to the developers. This could create anonymity issues for the cybercriminals themselves. An ironic twist, really.
Huh. Okay. Any other nasty features?
Oh, yes. What's particularly noteworthy and quite devious is a feature they called swap wallet functionality.
Swap wallet. What does that do?
If this particular configuration is active on the victim's machine, when the victim copies a cryptocurrency address like Bitcoin or Ethereum, or even a PayPal address onto their clipboard, maybe to paste it somewhere to receive a payment, the stealer actively and silently replaces it in the clipboard with a predefined attacker's address.
No way. So the money goes to the attacker instead.
Precisely. Funds intended for the victim could be misdirected straight to the attacker's wallet without the victim noticing until it's too late. This sophisticated feature requires the stealer to stay hidden and active on the victim's machine, constantly monitoring their clipboard activity. Which brings us to persistence.
Right. So how does it achieve that persistence? How does Nova Sentinel manage to stay hidden and keep running on your computer even after you restart it? Because that swap wallet thing wouldn't work if it just ran once.
Good point. Nova Sentinel has three primary methods for maintaining persistence on a system, assuming its initial configuration allows it. Config startup set to yes. The first method involves copying the malware itself to a common, yet often overlooked, system folder, like your %pay, Microsoft Windows Themes cache files directory. Then, it creates a scheduled task, an automatic task set up in Windows designed to execute the stealer every time the victim logs on. This task might be given a name that tries to look legitimate, maybe something like Windows driver setup XXXX.
Okay, sneaky. What's the second method?
The second method also involves copying the malware, this time to another system folder, %ppp edit %Microsoft Windows templates. Here, it creates another automatic task, but this one is set to execute daily at noon. What's amusingly telling about the sometimes surprisingly low code quality, or maybe just the attitude of the developers, is that the task name written directly in the stealer's code for this specific persistence task is start cake a task.
Start cake a task. Seriously.
Seriously. It's quite an unprofessional and, frankly, comical naming choice for a piece of malware that's supposed to be stealthy. Gives you a glimpse into the mindset, maybe.
Wow. Okay, and the third method?
The third method is arguably the simplest and most direct. The malware copies itself to your %activity edit %Microsoft Windows Start menu program startup folder. Anything in that folder automatically executes every single time your system starts up. So even if the victim restarts their computer, the stealer remains active and continues its malicious operations, ensuring a persistent foothold on the compromised machine.
So once this data, passwords, cookies, maybe swapped crypto addresses is stolen, where does it actually go? And I hear there's something called a dual hook. That sounds pretty wild.
Right. So where the data lands. In previous versions, Nova Sentinel relied on just a single platform, gofile.io, to share the stolen data logs with its clients, the operators who bought the service. But with version 12.5, they significantly diversified their hosting providers. They added 11 more for a total of 12, including services like file.io and tmpfiles.org.
Why do that? Why use 12 different places?
It's likely an attempt to mitigate service availability issues. If one hosting provider went down or blocked them, their entire operation wouldn't be completely disrupted. It builds in redundancy, a smart move for operational reliability from their perspective.
Makes sense. Okay, but what about this dual hook? What's that about?
Yes. This is where it truly gets interesting, and frankly, a bit scandalous even within the cybercriminal world itself. During their analysis of these new hosting providers and the data flow, the analysts uncovered what they called a closely guarded secret of Nova Sentinel. That's the developer group behind the stealer. They confirmed a long-held hypothesis of a dual hook.
Okay. Explain the dual hook.
It means that the stolen data, which is transmitted to the client who purchased and used the stealer, is also secretly collected by Nova Sentinel itself. It gets sent simultaneously to their own dedicated server at hxps.nova-sentinel.com/lovely load.
Wait, so the developers are stealing the data from their own criminal customers?
Effectively, yes. This allows the Nova Sentinel group to freely retrieve all this information for their own purposes, essentially giving them access to everything their clients steal without the clients necessarily knowing. It's a complete betrayal of their own paying customers, who are themselves engaged in illicit activities. They're double-dipping, stealing from the thieves.
That is brazen. Does this tell us anything else about their operation?
It certainly does. This level of internal duplicity, combined with other findings, reveals quite a bit. Infostealer also includes a module for self-protection, designed to prevent its execution in controlled testing environments used by analysts, things like virtual machines or sandboxes.
How does it do that?
It checks system details like the size of the hard disks, the amount of RAM, specific hardware IDs, the operating system version, CPU, GPU. These details are then compared against internal block lists of known analysis environments. If any match, the program halts execution, aiming to evade detection by security researchers. Standard anti-analysis stuff.
But you mentioned code quality issues earlier.
Yes. Despite these attempts at sophistication, the analysts also identified several functional errors within the code itself, unrelated to the obfuscation, real bugs. These errors actually hinder the proper operation of some of the malware's modules, meaning it might not even steal everything it's supposed to, or it might crash. So in summary, you've got this combination: relatively low code quality, these inherent security gaps, functional errors, and the brazen presence of that dual hook, where the developers are double-crossing their own clients. All this largely explains the relatively low price of the service offered by Nova Sentinel. They're providing a cheap, somewhat flawed tool, and then profiting even more from their clients' illicit activities by secretly taking a cut of everything stolen.
Wow. Okay, so shifting gears a bit, what does this all mean for the financial side of cybercrime? It sounds like Infostealers are incredibly profitable, making them a booming business.
Absolutely. The proliferation of these stealer-as-a-service operations, like Nova Sentinel and many others, has dramatically lowered both the financial and technical barriers, as we discussed. It's made it feasible for even less sophisticated cybercriminals to engage in these activities. It has truly democratized this form of cybercrime in a way we haven't quite seen before with other malware types.
And the market is competitive, I gather.
Incredibly so. Research has shown that the hosted stealer market is very mature and highly competitive. Some operators were offering Infostealers for as low as, say, $12 a month back in 2023. That's less than many streaming subscriptions.
$12 a month to become a cybercriminal, that's crazy. What about the economics for the providers, the people selling the service?
For the service providers running these operations, the economics are strikingly clear and very attractive. They typically incur only a few one-off costs. Maybe purchasing the initial license to use the Infostealer from the developer, if they didn't write it themselves, and the registration fee for the domain used to host their command and control server. Their primary ongoing cost is simply server hosting, which can be relatively cheap. Based on these calculations, researchers concluded that the stealer-as-a-service business model is extremely profitable. Many operators achieve profit margins well over 90%, with revenues easily reaching into the high thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars per month.
90% profit margins. It's a low-cost, high-reward criminal enterprise.
Yeah, exactly. Which makes it highly attractive and fuels its growth.
And what about the broader impact? How has this profitability and accessibility affected the scale of the threat we're seeing in the wider cybersecurity landscape? Are we seeing more incidents?
Oh, absolutely. The numbers are indeed alarming. Due to their extreme profitability and ease of access, the number of cybersecurity incidents involving Infostealers has risen significantly. One major contributing factor cited by researchers is the big shift post-pandemic to remote and hybrid work environments.
How does that increase the risk?
Well, when companies allow employees to access sensitive enterprise services and data from their potentially less secure home machines, it creates new vulnerabilities. Your home network and personal computer likely don't have the same level of security as a corporate office network. Infostealers readily exploit these weaker points, dramatically increasing their effectiveness and reach into corporate environments via those home machines.
That makes sense. Do we have any data on this increase?
Yes, some pretty stark figures. Research from SecureWorks in 2023 showed that the number of Infostealer logs, remember, that's the data extracted from each compromised computer, absolutely exploded on the Russian market, which is the biggest underground cyber forum for this stuff. The number of logs available for sale increased from about 2 million in June 2022 to a staggering 5 million by February 2023.
Wow, more than doubled in just 8 months.
Exactly, a 150% increase. And Kaspersky's research in mid-2023 further indicated that Infostealers accounted for a full 24%, nearly a quarter, of all malware offered as a service. They're a huge slice of the MaaS pie.
What about more recently, say 2024 figures?
Looking specifically at 2024, the scale is even more striking. It's estimated that Infostealers were used to steal something like 2.1 billion credentials globally.
Yeah, billion, with a B.
Billion, yes. To put that in perspective, that accounted for over 60% of all credentials stolen from organizations that year. Over half the stolen logins came via Infostealers. And as we mentioned, they're cheap. The average monthly cost for these services was around $200 in 2024, though some are much cheaper, as we saw with Nova.
And it's not just individuals being hit, right? You mentioned government agencies earlier.
Absolutely, not just individuals. Major incidents are occurring at a national and international level. For instance, on February 18, 2025, it was widely reported that Infostealers had compromised email accounts and credentials across multiple U.S. government and military departments, including, reportedly, the FBI. This highlights the severe, wide-ranging impact of what might seem like a simple credential theft. It can directly threaten national security.
That's astonishing, the scale of it. Now, what's particularly fascinating, as you touched on with Infostealer, is that beyond the well-known, often Russian-speaking giants in the cybercrime world, there's this thriving ecosystem of smaller, often younger, maybe French-speaking groups that are also very active. It paints a more nuanced picture.
That's absolutely right. The technical analysis of Infostealer, combined with continuous monitoring of their activities on social networks, particularly Telegram, has revealed a remarkably dynamic ecosystem within this French stealer landscape. These groups actively use platforms like Telegram, not just to promote their malicious services, but also, surprisingly, to actively discredit one another.
They attack each other publicly.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of infighting and attempts to damage rivals' reputations. This competitive environment, where they publicly squabble, actually helps analysts map out this malicious ecosystem more effectively, because they inadvertently reveal details about each other's operations and identities sometimes.
How many such groups are we talking about?
During recent research conducted between March and July 2024, analysts identified approximately 10 distinct, active French-speaking groups. Many of them share similar profiles, which isn't too surprising given that most use malware copied or derived directly from open-source repositories on platforms like GitHub. They often make only minor modifications.
So they're not necessarily coding geniuses themselves.
Many of the operators aren't, no. They're leveraging readily available code. What's interesting is that despite numerous threat analysis reports produced by French companies and institutions highlighting various cyber threats, the specific topic of small-scale local cybercrime, like these groups, is rarely addressed in depth. This is likely because these groups often specifically target individuals rather than large companies, or they carry out a relatively lower volume of attacks compared to the big international players. They fly under the radar more easily. The Epsilon group is a notable exception here, having gained notoriety specifically for directly targeting French companies.
Okay. And are they sticking just to info stealing or branching out?
They're definitely diversifying. Their activities often go beyond simple data theft. Some actors, for instance, now offer services like renting out their command and control server infrastructure for distributed denial of service, or DDoS attacks.
DDoS. That's where they flood a website with traffic to knock it offline.
Exactly. We saw an advertisement on Telegram offering a DDoS service for as little as 55 euros for 2 months. These DDoS attacks leverage the large number of already compromised computers, infected by their stealers, for example, coordinated by the C2 servers to overwhelm a target. These activities are relatively easy to set up and manage, making them accessible even to novice cybercriminals looking for another revenue stream or just disruption.
And anything even further afield?
Even more surprisingly, yes. Investigations into various groups have revealed that some diversify into other, completely unrelated criminal ventures. For example, during an investigation into that Epsilon group, a clear connection was discovered between a Telegram channel openly offering drugs for sale in the specific French city, Grenoble, and an account involved in selling leaked data stolen by the group.
Wow, so a direct link between cybercrime and drug trafficking.
A direct link in that case, yes. This is a crucial insight, as it shows a broader integration into the criminal underworld, where stolen credentials or access can be a commodity traded for other illicit gains, blurring the lines between different types of criminal activity. It's not just about digital crime anymore for some of these actors.
That's truly incredible, the diversification. So if these tools, especially the cheaper ones like Nova, are so easy to use, who's actually buying them and what kind of data are they really after? You mentioned younger actors.
Right. The buyer demographic is quite revealing. The accessibility is striking, as we said. Links to online shops like Nova Sentinels are readily provided on public Telegram channels. Anyone can find them. Once a purchase is made, often using cryptocurrency, everything is automated and managed by a Discord bot. This level of automation significantly simplifies the use of the stealer, making the tool especially accessible to inexperienced buyers. And the prices, again, are remarkably low. A 1-month subscription for Nova Sentinel, for example, costs just €4.8. That's practically nothing. Compare that to larger, more established stealers like VDAR, which might be priced around $130 per week.
€480 versus $130 a week. That's a massive difference.
Huge. And these attractive low prices and the sheer ease of use make these tools particularly accessible to teenagers, a buyer demographic that is often overlooked in traditional cybercrime analyses focused on sophisticated state actors or large ransomware gangs.
How can we be sure it's teenagers, or at least very young people?
We can deduce this from a few key pieces of evidence. Beyond linguistic clues and the general, sometimes immature nature of interactions observed in their Telegram channels, the exfiltrated data itself provides strong indicators. For instance, the frequent presence of Pronote, which is a widely used French school life management software used for grades, homework, communication, and the inclusion of various gaming websites like Steam, Epic Games, etc. in the default Infostealer configurations strongly suggest a young target audience. They're often trying to hijack game accounts or maybe access school systems, not necessarily targeting corporate networks for high-value data.
Okay, so the targets reflect younger interests.
Exactly. This also raises questions about the intent behind collecting this specific type of information, as things like game accounts or school logins hold relatively low resale value in the traditional high-stakes cybercrime markets compared to, say, corporate credentials or financial accounts. Furthermore, the limited number of cryptocurrency wallet stealing modules in some of these cheaper stealer configurations is also a bit surprising, again potentially pointing to a less financially motivated or less sophisticated attacker profile. Based on open-source data collected for these groups, things they post online, usernames, etc., analysts have even been able to estimate that these specific French Infostealers are probably developed by cybercriminals aged roughly between 15 and 25 years old.
15 years old. Building malware?
It appears so, yes. So you have very young individuals building these tools, often by modifying existing open-source code, and potentially even younger individuals buying and using them, often just for bragging rights within their online communities, or for small-time scams like stealing game items.
So what do most buyers do with the stolen data then?
Observations suggest that while most buyers simply showcase their loot, post screenshots of stolen accounts or data logs on Telegram to show off without ever actually reselling the retrieved information. The analysis of these numerous channels reveals an important pattern. These cheaper, more accessible malicious tools primarily target individuals, not companies. This differentiates them significantly from larger, more organized groups focused on enterprise-level attacks and big payouts.
But some are more ambitious.
Yes, some groups, like Nova, are acutely aware of the broader implications and potential value of their activities, even if their primary user base isn't. They leverage their visibility within the scene to integrate channels specifically dedicated to the resale of information within their Telegram groups. They facilitate the market. In doing so, they effectively control the entire access broker chain, from the initial data theft by their users to its eventual resale by third parties or themselves.
So they become initial access brokers, selling the keys to other criminals.
Precisely. This allows them to become crucial initial access brokers for other, more sophisticated attacks. They provide that first critical foothold into a network or system, which they then sell to ransomware groups or other larger operations who will carry out the main attack.
And you mentioned the Epsilon group was different.
Right. The Epsilon group, which we mentioned earlier in connection with drug trafficking, stands out in this landscape. They became a major player not just by stealing, but by directly targeting and then selling data harvested specifically from French companies. This tactic hadn't really been observed from other French groups until them. This elevated their status significantly within the underground, but also put them much more firmly on the radar of law enforcement.
It seems like even these small-scale actors can cause big problems. What are the legal consequences they might face, especially if they do act as feeders for larger attacks?
It's critical to understand the legal ramifications, yes. Even for these seemingly small-scale actors, often very young, the consequences can be severe. In France, for example, basic actions related to developing, distributing, or using Infostealers can result in up to 3 years in prison and a fine of 100,000 euros. However, if their connection to a subsequent major attack, such as a ransomware operation that uses the access they provided, is proven, the potential prison sentence can increase dramatically up to 10 years, with a fine of up to 200,000 euros. This illustrates how even these seemingly minor actors can be absolutely crucial links in large-scale, highly damaging cybercrime operations, and they face very serious legal jeopardy because of it.
Okay, so given how widespread and, well, often stealthy these operations are, how do cybersecurity analysts actually track these threat actors and their infrastructures? It seems like finding a needle in a digital haystack, especially when they're actively trying to hide.
It definitely can be a challenge, yeah. While some French groups, like we saw with Nova Sentinel, sometimes lack significant infrastructure obfuscation, maybe hosting all their services, including their C2 servers, on a single server, which ironically makes them vulnerable to a single takedown if found. Other actors employ far more sophisticated concealment techniques. Many try to hide their C2 servers by abusing legitimate everyday services, things like Discord, Telegram, the gaming platform Steam, or even federated social networks like Mastodon.
Using normal services to hide, how does that work?
By embedding their C2 information or relaying communications through these popular platforms, they try to blend their malicious traffic in with legitimate user activity, making it harder to spot and block. While this offers them resilience and persistence by piggybacking on robust infrastructure, it also provides unique tracking opportunities for analysts. It forces us to get creative and follow these digital breadcrumbs in unexpected places.
Can you give us some examples of how analysts track them using these legitimate services?
Sure, let's look at a couple of case studies that illustrate this ingenuity on both sides, the criminals and the analysts. Take the vidar stealer, for instance. Its modus operandi, which has been discussed in security reports, sometimes involve the infected implant at the malware on the victim's computer, retrieving its command and control server address in a really clever way. It queries a specific Steam user profile ID, and the IP address of the C2 server is actually embedded right there in the Steam username itself.
In the username, like C2 server at 1.2.3.4.
Sometimes almost that obvious or slightly encoded, yeah. What's incredibly useful for analysts is that Steam, as a platform feature, allows anyone to view a history of previously used usernames for any public account. This provides a powerful tool to track the changing IP addresses of the C2 servers over time, just by monitoring that profile's username history. It allows proactive monitoring of even dormant servers associated with past campaigns.
So you can see where the C2 used to be, where it might pop up next.
Potentially, yes. It often serves as a fallback communication method for the malware, used when its primary way of finding the C2 fails. Using this Steam profile tracking method, analysts observed around 60 active vidar campaigns just in the past 6 months or so. It's a clever trick, using a popular gaming platform as a stealthy communication channel.
That's fascinating. Okay, what's another example?
Let's turn to Asyncrat. This is actually an open-source remote administration tool originally intended for legitimate sysadmin use, but it's been widely repurposed by criminals for credential theft and building botnets, those networks of compromised computers. A particularly stealthy deployment method for Asyncrat was discovered in late 2023. Its resources, typically things like zip archives containing the malware and PowerShell scripts to run it, are disguised. They're given file extensions like .jpg for images and .txt for text files.
Disguised as harmless files.
Exactly. And then they're hosted in publicly accessible open directories on web servers. These are essentially like public folders on a website that are unintentionally left open for anyone to browse, often due to misconfiguration. These seemingly innocuous files contain scrambled hexadecimal strings, just long strings of numbers and letters. But when decoded and assembled correctly by a loader script, they reveal the actual asyncret malware payload. This consistent behavior suggests it's a lasting tactic for these actors.
So how do you even find these hidden asyncret servers among all the open directories out there?
Tracking these asyncret infrastructures requires a very precise, multi-step methodology, like digital detective work. The first key indicator is the Open Directory presence itself. While there are hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions, of Open Directories online, finding servers hosting files this way is our starting point. Next, we look for very specific file naming patterns, particularly pairs of .txt and .jpg files within these directories. Searching for just those significantly reduces the number of potential candidates, maybe down to the thousands. We've even seen instances with multiple pairs, corresponding to different malware samples hosted on the same server.
Okay, so open directories plus specific file types. What else?
We then refine our search criteria even further. We look for a specific hexadecimal string related to port 443, the standard port for secure HTTPS traffic, appearing within the web server's response when we probe it. And we filter specifically for servers actively using that port 443. This narrowed the results down dramatically in studies, correctly identifying all the confirmed asyncret instances.
Are there challenges like legitimate servers looking similar?
Yes, there are definitely challenges. There can be overlap with legitimate infrastructures, and there's high variability in how the malware itself is configured by different actors. But we use more advanced techniques too. For instance, we use something called a JARM fingerprint. Think of it like a unique digital signature or fingerprint that a server leaves behind based on how it negotiates secure TLS connections. By identifying a specific, consistent JARM fingerprint associated with these asyncret C2 setups, analysts can pinpoint these hidden servers with remarkable accuracy, even when they're trying to blend in with normal secure web traffic.
JRM fingerprinting. That sounds quite technical.
It is, but it's very effective for identifying specific types of servers or services at scale. We also sometimes use a method called banner grabbing. This involves sending basic requests to network services and capturing the initial responses, or banners, which sometimes contain metadata about the service. While it can theoretically gather details like software versions, it has practical limitations here, often due to the small number of shared ports used and varying response lengths. It's usually just one piece of the puzzle, not the whole picture for asyncret.
So how accurate is this whole process when you combine everything?
By combining these precise filtering conditions, the use of open directories, the presence of those specific .jpg and .txt files, the port 443 string in the HTTP response, and that consistent JARM fingerprint, analysts can achieve approximately 70% accuracy with 100% true positives in identifying these asyncret C2 servers.
100% true positives means you don't miss any known ones.
Exactly. All known asyncret instances using this method were identified. And for complete absolute accuracy, a simple Python script can be used to automatically verify the file names and their contents against known patterns, achieving a 100% true positive rate with very high confidence.
That's incredible work. And just to reiterate, this isn't just academic curiosity, right? What's the end goal?
Absolutely not just academic. The ultimate goal of this kind of deep research and tracking is to enhance protection tools, antivirus, firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and continuously update indicators of compromise, or IOCs. Those are the digital clues, the fingerprints like JARM or specific file hashes that tell security systems something malicious is happening. The aim is to identify these threats before they become fully active and widely exploited by criminals. It's all about proactive defense, staying one step ahead if possible.
Makes perfect sense. Now, even with all the sophistication we've been discussing, both from the attackers and the defenders, it turns out that cybercriminals often make surprisingly basic mistakes in their operational security, their OPSEC. They give themselves away.
You're absolutely right. It happens more often than you might think. OPSEC, operational security, refers to all the methods criminals use, or should use, to prevent the disclosure of information that could reveal their real identities or sensitive details about their operations. And many, particularly the younger or less experienced actors we often see in ecosystems like the French one, make glaring errors that are, well, quite astonishing sometimes. We observe two main types: those made carelessly on platforms like Telegram and those made on underground forums.
Okay, what kind of mistakes do they make on Telegram?
Well, for starters, some group administrators have actually been observed engaging in doxing, which again is maliciously disclosing someone's personal information of other users within their own criminal community, maybe someone they had a dispute with. Irony aside, it shows a certain recklessness. Other errors come from the users themselves, such as having poorly configured account privacy settings, which might inadvertently expose their real phone numbers. Now, we always advise caution with phone numbers found this way, as they could belong to temporary, untraceable SMS services bought specifically for illicit use. But it's still a potentially significant lapse in their supposed anonymity.
Any really blatant example?
Oh, yeah. Here's an astonishing example of carelessness. Some administrators have posted details about their actual real-life vacations on their supposedly anonymous criminal channels. We've seen photos taken from an airport, sometimes including a visible plane wing, maybe the departure board in the background, or even mentioning the departure time of their flight.
You're kidding. They post vacation pics on their crime forum.
Some do. By analyzing such seemingly innocent details, flight times, airline liveries, maybe even reflections in sunglasses, it's theoretically possible to determine the destination, potentially the passenger seat number, and if law enforcement had access to airline boarding lists, even identify the individual responsible for the photo. It's shockingly poor OPSEC. Furthermore, analysts often observe a noticeable summer pause in most of these particular groups' activities online. This pause frequently coincides perfectly with school or university summer breaks, providing additional strong circumstantial clues about the likely young profiles of these administrators. Their criminal enterprise takes a backseat to summer vacation.
Wow. Wow. Okay, what about mistakes on forums? You mentioned the Epsilon group earlier.
Right, the Epsilon Group. Remember, they became a major player by targeting French companies and selling their stolen customer databases on well-known underground forums like Breach Forums and XSS. They made a truly costly blunder there. Their critical OPSEC error was using the exact same contact username Chatnoir@Devuco for all of their sales posts across these different forums over time. This created a clear, singular digital trail linking all their activities back to one identity.
Okay, using the same name everywhere is sloppy. How did that bite them?
Here's where it gets really fascinating and quite ironic. By actively monitoring the XSS forum, analysts noticed that in May 2024, this very same account, Chatnoir@Devuco, filed a scam complaint on the forum's dedicated channel for reporting ripoffs within the community. The author reported being scammed out of $700 while trying to buy a Revolut business account, which, as you can imagine, was most likely intended for money laundering the proceeds of their crimes.
So they got scammed trying to facilitate their own crimes and then complained about it publicly using their known criminal alias.
Exactly. And this scam post, intended perhaps to warn others or maybe get the forum admins to ban the scammer, ended up exposing a wealth of information about the post's author, who was clearly linked to the Chatnoir@Devuco account used for selling stolen data. The post included things like the scammer's contact details, useful intelligence in itself, the full Telegram chat exchanges between them, screenshots from cryptocurrency exchange applications showing the failed transaction, the post author's own Bitcoin address used in the transaction.
My God.
It gets better. It also inadvertently revealed another Telegram account linked to that drug-selling service operating in Grenoble we mentioned earlier, potential related social media accounts like Twitter that might share patterns, and even the specific VPN service they were using at the time they took the screenshots. It was an absolute intelligence goldmine, dropped right into the laps of analysts and law enforcement monitoring the forum.
All from complaining about being scammed out of $700.
Pretty much. Now, while it's impossible to definitively confirm from the post alone that the author of the scam complaint and the user Chatnoir@Devuco are the exact same physical person, all the group's previous sales posts consistently pointed to Devuco as the contact. The link was undeniable. And perhaps unsurprisingly, news reports have since emerged, confirming that this particular user is now in the hands of the authorities, highlighting how a seemingly minor operational security mistake fueled by frustration or carelessness can lead directly to significant real-world consequences for cybercriminals.
That is an incredible story. A cautionary tale for criminals, I suppose.
So
bringing it back to our listeners, what can we as individuals or what can businesses do? What's the critical takeaway for trying to protect ourselves against these pervasive Infostealer threats?
Well, for anyone in a security role, like a Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, or even an IT admin, actively supervising for data breaches and leaks has become an absolutely critical priority. It's no longer enough to just react after you discover a compromise internally. It's essential to promptly detect potential leaks of your organization's credentials or data out there on the dark web or Telegram and take action before that information is widely exploited by criminals to gain initial access.
How can organizations do that proactively?
There are now specialized threat intelligence services that actively monitor for leaked sensitive information, things like employee email addresses, login credentials associated with corporate domains, maybe sensitive internal documents, even corporate phone numbers, scraping data from sources like these Telegram channels, underground forums, and paste sites where data is often dumped. Proactively identifying this leaked data when it first appears allows organizations to mitigate intrusion risks immediately. They can force password resets for affected accounts, revoke compromised credentials, and essentially stay one step ahead of the cybercriminals who might buy or find that data later. It's about closing the window of opportunity.
And for individuals, and maybe reinforcing for organizations too, what are the basic crucial defenses?
For individuals and organizations alike, the risks are hugely amplified by common yet incredibly dangerous practices. Password reuse is probably the biggest one. Using the same password, or even simple variations of it, across multiple accounts is a massive vulnerability. If just one minor service you use gets compromised by an Infostealer and that password leaks, suddenly all your other accounts using that same password, potentially, including your work accounts, your bank, your email, are immediately at risk.
So unique passwords everywhere is key.
Absolutely non-negotiable. And related to that, using your professional or work email address to sign up for personal online services significantly increases risk. If one of those personal services gets breached and your work email is exposed, even if the password was different, it gives attackers a verified corporate email address to target with spear phishing or password spraying attacks. It creates a direct, easy link for them to try and infiltrate your work environment.
So keep work and personal separate and use strong, unique passwords for everything. A password manager seems almost essential these days.
Highly recommended, yes. Password managers make creating, storing, and filling unique, complex passwords for every single site incredibly easy. They solve the password reuse problem almost entirely. Enabling two-factor authentication, 2FA, wherever possible is also absolutely critical.
What about the bigger picture? Are law enforcement efforts making a dent in this?
The global community is definitely stepping up efforts, yes. These operations are often transnational, so international cooperation is key. For example, there was a major international police operation codenamed Magnus on October 28 recently. It specifically targeted large-scale Infostealer operations like Redline and Meta. This operation, involving law enforcement from multiple countries working together, successfully disrupted several major groups that were collectively responsible for stealing over 227 million passwords in 2024 alone, according to reports. This underscores the vital need for continued international cooperation and shared intelligence to combat this widespread, constantly evolving threat effectively. It's truly a collective fight that requires everyone to play a part, individuals practicing good cyber hygiene, organizations implementing robust defenses and monitoring, and global law enforcement working to dismantle the criminal infrastructure.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Today, we've really peeled back the layers on infostealers, haven't we? Revealing a rapidly evolving threat driven by these accessible malware-as-a-service models and, surprisingly often, by very young actors. From their technical inner workings, like grabbing cookies and swapping crypto wallets, to the fascinating ways analysts track them through digital breadcrumbs on Steam or via their own OPSEC blunders. It's clear this isn't just some niche technical problem anymore. It's a fundamental challenge to our collective digital security, impacting everyone, from individuals to major government agencies worldwide.
Absolutely. And understanding this landscape, how it works, who's involved, why it's happening, that's really essential for adapting your own defenses. Whether you're listening as an individual or you're part of an organization's security team, vigilance regarding your digital footprint is key. Implementing strong, unique passwords, using 2FA, being aware of phishing attempts, these are your first and most critical lines of defense. And the ability of these groups to adapt and innovate, like using legitimate services for C2 or diversifying into other crimes, means our defenses have to evolve just as quickly. We need to be constantly learning from their tactics and, frankly, from our own mistakes, too.
Definitely food for thought. And maybe here's a final provocative thought for our listeners to consider as we close out. If even these seemingly small-scale cybercriminals, these teenagers maybe, are leveraging stolen credentials for things like drug trafficking and acting as the crucial first step, the initial access brokers for major multi-million-dollar ransomware operations, what does that really tell us about the hidden, interconnected web of the broader criminal underworld? And what does it say about the true, often devastating cost of a single leaked password? It's far more pervasive and dangerous than most of us realize, a constant, sobering reminder of our digital vulnerability. That's all the time we have for this deep dive into the world of infostealers. Our thanks again to our sponsor, Stonefly. Stonefly is a leader in enterprise storage, backup, and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. For secure ransomware-proof storage solutions, including air-gapped and immutable options, remember you can contact sales at stonefly.com to schedule a demo. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to tune in next time for another deep dive.